I went to edit it, I said to Mark, I was like, man, like some of this is a little bit choppy. And I was expecting Mark to be like, oh, go fuck yourself. And Mark was like, no, man, like we can do it again. And I was like, oh, he's very Canadian.
I missed you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. You were like, I could have edited it perfectly. You'd be like, did that okay?
I haven't seen anyone other than my girlfriend and my cat in weeks. So.
Mark, my first real question for you, because I was doing a bit of research, as I tell people, it's like a Tinder date, but people show up to this. So, like, where did this band all start? Like, from what I understood, it's you and Colin were in school together, and it was like a French, I want to say a French rap battle, but it's like a French battle, and it's like, hey, from that's where the band formed. Now, it's an interesting story. I hope there's more to it, but to me, I always imagined, say, Much Music in the Morning, where it was like French Kiss, or like when you see like on YouTube when people just have, I think it's like history battles or battle of history. I don't know how a French battle would work. Like, again, I'm a Newfoundlander. I don't know French. Maybe you guys do, but that's just weird to me. It's like, hey, you two, French battle right now. You're like, I guess.
It was a French battle of the bands. It was called Chicane Électrique.
Okay.
And we actually, it's pretty funny. Colin and I were not friends. And we actually, we didn't really even like each other. We both, I think, were a little bit musical. So there were some teachers at our school who there wasn't a lot of interest in this project because it was an immersion school. So a lot of the kids didn't necessarily always have, no one knew any French music. So the idea that you were going to do a battle of the bands playing French music was, I think, pretty tough for most people. And then so they said, you guys are going to go in it and you're going to go together. And so that was kind of fun. Well, and you're 15, 16 years old or whatever. And the chance to like perform in front of your school, I think, is pretty enticing for most people. So I think we were both committed to doing it, but it was fun. We had never, I don't think I'd ever thought about writing a song before. We decided that we just didn't vibe with a lot of, it was tougher to find French music back then. Like, it wasn't as easy as like Spotify or something now, where you could literally just like find because like there's great French music out there. Yeah. We had stumbled upon none of it, so we decided to just write our own, and we were listening to a ton of like pop punk emo at the time. So we wrote these like two like French emo songs, and had a blast.
The first ever of its genre, the first ever of its kind.
Yeah. So like, and obviously, like, yeah, like, so just jammed out about our ex-girlfriends for 3.5 minutes twice, and we ended up winning the competition. I think we got the thing. It was obviously really fun to win, but the thing that we really took away from it was like the process of writing was really cool. And it just became this thing that I don't think, like, neither of us are very, like, we're not very good at overtly seeking attention. So we didn't really tell anyone. We just started writing music together. It was just something we would do. Like, that was our hang after that. Like, it was, so we wrote for probably 2 or 3 years, like throughout kind of our early 20s, and just, we didn't really show anyone. And then finally some friends of ours stumbled upon a CD that we'd made. We'd adopted Graham at this point to play guitar with us and mostly just kind of hang out and drink beers. And so we were writing a lot. And then, some pals of ours found, like, they were at our house or whatever, and heard some songs we did. And then somebody stole a copy of the CD and then started burning copies of it and giving them to all of our friends. And they forced us to play a show. And that's kind of when it like started, way, way, way back when.
It's interesting. Like, a friend just like basically like, I'm going to steal this, burn it off, and give it to friends. It's like there's a part of you that's like, hey, don't steal my stuff. But then there's another part of you. It's like, I guess he has like the best intentions, though, right? Like, I guess, or either that, or he was like, I'm gonna like have all these CDs burnt off, make fun of them, and then you turn into the Treble. It's like, who's laughing now?
No, it was cool. It was, I don't know. I mean, it was a very flattering, obviously, to have people like, I mean, I think, well, we really liked the music that we were writing. We were really like, we were happy about it. We were, but I don't know that we ever really would have shown people, like, other than like, you know, like literally, like, I think the only time we'd ever really show people is if they were like if they were at our, like, it was like we were hanging out at my house a lot, and it was like if people were over, you would play it for them.
Yeah.
Like a really comfortable setting and kind of like, hey, what do you think of this? But we wouldn't have ever like done a big thing. And we struggle with that for quite a bit throughout our journey in terms of like not really feeling like it was okay to share. Which is like a really horrible trait to be in a band. But so when we were in the studio writing our recording our first like real record, so we were working with a guy in Winnipeg named Chris Gaffney, who's really cool. He played in this awesome 80s band called the Pumps. And kind of, you know, his career was rock and roll. So he was kind of he was mentoring us quite a bit at the time. He's like, well, you guys are going to need a drummer and a bass player. And that was kind of our criteria for that. We're like, we need someone who is shameless. Like we need we need rock stars. Like we need people who are going to want who aren't afraid to put themselves out there, because if we got any more introverts, I think we would have
it would just be like one of those bands where it's like, I feel like it's a podcast in itself, where it's like, welcome to the band you never heard of, because they don't tell you that
we never would have played a show. So if it wasn't for Patrick and it was Pat and Dana was our drummer at the time, and if it wasn't for those guys, I think we wouldn't have flown as high as we've been lucky to have done. Just kind of helping us get out of our shell and all that. But it's been pretty cool, and like that collaborative element. That's like the most fun part of being in a band is everyone having a little bit of I don't know that every band's like this. For ours, it's 5 very, very distinct personalities. So everyone gives a little bit something different.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I was interested there when you were mentioning, of course, how it all came together is you mentioned you and Colin weren't like friends. Were you like, some people will take immediately to that and go like, oh, well, they must have hated each other, or were they enemies? Or it was just like you never had crossed paths. Like, because I know sometimes in high school, it's like you know of someone, but you never really engage with them. But it's like there's not really like you don't like them. It's just like I've never had the input to go talk to them, because why would I?
No, we kind of didn't like each other. And like for context, we're like literally like, I think as close as best friends can be now. Like we're like, so we've lived together for years. We don't live together anymore, but we're still like he's he was in our COVID bubble for a long time. Like we are just about as close as you can get. We did like each other. We were just, I don't know. He thought that I was, I don't know, like I just had spiky blonde hair. I had like sweet frosted tips in high school. So I was a lot to take back then. And I don't know. I don't really remember what I thought of him. He was so emo at the time. He had low lights. He had like low lights and straightened hair with like the swoop all the way down. Like the full thing. So I think I just was like, I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah, it's like that's polar opposites to me. Like when I think of that, like now I'm trying to remember like of a Canadian reference, but it's almost like saying you are the BB or the B44 and he is like the Marianas Trench. And it's how do you guys intermix?
B44 had a very, very successful song, so I don't want to speak ill of other Canadian musicians.
No.
But I resent that comparison. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, I don't know. We started speaking music together, and I think that was like a language that we both understood in our own. We totally vibed on the same stuff. Like I think we both had our idea of what music like we liked, but then also like what music could be, especially in like the genres we were listening to at the time. Like we really had a vision for like where we could take something, which was really cool. And then ended up learning, I mean, and I I preach this to anyone who will listen all the time, but it's like the people that you have that little bit of, like maybe you don't like them, or you feel like judging them, or whatever it is, like those are typically the people you can learn the most from. So yeah, I think that's kind of cool. Like that's where like our friendship and like, yeah, like literally like my best friend probably, like, and at the time it was like, who is this guy?
Yeah. It's funny when you mention that, because there have been dynamics of like from past interviews we've done now, not just even in the music side of things, but just overall, that the people maybe didn't see eye to eye at the beginning, but like you'd be so surprised that you're like, how did you guys not see eye to eye? Like, for example, here in the East Coast, now I know it's all over Canada, you can watch it too, but like this hour is 22 minutes. Like I think it's Kathy Jones and Mary Walsh. They will tell you they are night and day. But yet when you see them together, when you see like, on 22 minutes, them playing like the old elderly sisters or old elderly women, you're like, man, you guys must have like instantly when you guys met, you must have hit it off. They're like, no, we're like sisters. We're not even friends. It's like we will go at each other's throats. And I'm like, that is surprising to me because you guys have such like a chemistry. But you're right. Like sometimes the people that you think like, oh man, I got nothing in common with them, or like I totally hate their guts, or we don't see eye to eye. And next minute when you get to know them, you're like, like, I wonder why. Wonder why we just didn't see that way. But now you guys formed, from doing a bit of research here, I could be wrong in this as well, but it says formed in 2008, but I don't believe you had your first kind of album since I think it was like 2017.
Yeah, we had some. We had like independent, so like our first big release was I think in 2017 or 2015. Like that was our first big kind of label release. We'd put out some EPs before then, but they were largely unpublished. So people in Winnipeg would there are people who would have a copy. They're available now. They're available like free on Bandcamp. Kind of, we had bumped around quite a bit in terms of like vision, genre, all that type of stuff. And then I think we finally got ourselves, I think we finally got the project to a place that we felt was cohesive for our first like big record, which was Modern Airs. That was kind of the first one that we really felt was, before then we had our last like EP before then, it was like almost a mix of like, there were some songs that were kind of alt rock, but there was like a little bit of like almost like a Mumford folk vibe to it too. And then there was some like pretty straightforward pop stuff, and it was like multiple genres on the same record. And I think so we got like especially from like the music industry and stuff, we got a ton of really, I think it was confusing because some people liked us and we still have like, there are still songs that like when we play in Winnipeg, and sometimes in Toronto too, and you get people who are like, they want to hear this one song that we used to play. And different people have like different versions of the band that they would gravitate towards. So it's cool. I mean, I think which I think is way easier to do now, in 2021 or whatever. I think people are a lot more receptive to people who, but back when we started, it was like the only way you could really like, or like maybe the easier path to success was kind of like through like the music industry route, which is through like labels and radio and all that type of stuff. And if you have a cohesive package, people really, they just won't bite. So we were working with like, managers and all that type of stuff back then. And so it was just kind of the counsel that we got was figure out who you are and then come see us. And so it was cool because it was a neat exercise because we had to figure out really like what is the Treble, what is our song, like, you know, like what is a song that represents us, and not kind of spread ourselves out so much, because it was great to be like, oh, well, I feel like writing this type of song, but it was all like more of an exercise to be like, no, like we're obviously, we love writing songs, and we love all sorts of different genres of music, but I think being able to kind of like channel that energy into something was cool, because I think we made some really some records we're really proud of, that I don't think ever would have came to be if it wasn't like letting go a little bit of some things that, you know, we were doing like a lot of folky stuff, because when you're doing like small independent touring and stuff, if you don't have upbeat music and you're playing in a bar, and like a lot of the first shows we played, where you're just the entertainment for that night. No one's there to see you because of your amazing original music. They're just, they want to tap their foot. So if you aren't playing something that's a little thumping, like it's really tough to work a room like that. So we started writing these kind of folky songs, and you know, to this day we still love them, and but it wasn't really, I think our wheelhouse is really a lot of the more melancholic stuff, or really, really like the big kind of anthemic, kind of like big, huge kind of like alt rock, alt pop kind of stuff. But that's kind of where we live, or we like to live. But it doesn't necessarily go well in a pub, right? Like it goes great. But when you're living that life where you're halfway in between, you're playing some big shows at real venues, and then you're playing other shows at just like a bar, a coffee shop, or something like that, where you're just what happens to be on stage that night. So you kind of had to, it was harder to be, I think, yourself, you know.
Yeah, I look at it from like there's a whole different aspect we can go into that, but it's like, to compare it, I guess, in the kind of the comedy sense, it's like if you go to an Absolute Comedy or a Yuck Yucks, like, you know, you're there to see comedy regardless of what it is. Like, you know, that's what you came to see, because it's an establishment. Where I look at, if someone has to say an open mic night or a comedy night at like a Pancake House or a Pizza Hut, where it's like, tonight we got a comedy, you're kind of like, I really didn't come for the comedy aspect, but okay, if you're funny, I guess I'll like it. But at a Yuck Yucks, you know that's what you're going in for.
Yeah, an edgier comic would have a way harder time to just do the dinner crowd at a pop-up like open mic style thing, where it's like, whereas if you're going to a comedy club or you're going to that person's show, that's what you want, right? But so you're kind of like, to be able to kill in that setting, you need to be pretty middle of the road, right? Like, so what, you know, so yeah, it's kind of an interesting thought.
It's funny, because when you were talking, of course, about this, like, the one thing that came to my mind as well is, you know, sometimes with record companies or labels, like, when you actually get in there and you sign that deal, they're kind of like, okay, like, let's hear some of your tunes. And they're like, okay, we want to kind of genre you in this category, where I don't really believe that's really around anymore. Like, it could still be there in terms of, if you go to iTunes, they'll obviously give you a label of alternate rock or rock, but like, for the most part, there are musicians out there, especially say in country music or pop, where it's like, one moment the song is a little bit like, you're like, okay, this is alternate rock. Next time it's like a pop song, but you're like, all right, like, to each their own. Like, when you were going off that example there, I was thinking the whole time of, say, a 1975 or a Headley, where you look at like Headley's earlier stuff compared to like their latest or their most recent, you're like, all right, earlier on it kind of sounded more like pop punk or a little bit of alternative, but then now it's kind of like, when you see like Cha-Ching or all that, you're like, well, that sounds a little bit more pop. And same with 1975, had like a lot of, say, pop songs, but if I go out and play NHL 22, or maybe NHL 21, there's a song on it called People by the 1975, and that's a little bit more grungy, and I'm like, okay, but people will just be like, you either like the song or like the band, or you're like, okay, maybe not a song I like, but still like the band. Where I feel like a label is more or less like, no, don't even think about releasing that. We've got you labeled as pop. What are you doing?
Yeah, I think you see that a little bit. Like, we've had, like, we're with a lovely independent label out of Toronto called Cadence Recordings, and they've always been really good to us in terms of like they'll provide guidance rather than they're not gonna like strong arm you into something. Like I think if we decided that we were gonna like make a mumble rap album or something like that, they'd probably counsel us.
Yeah, there you go. That's your next album right there.
I'm not a great mumble rapper, but you know, I don't know. I mean, I think now people I think are just like music listeners are just a lot more. Their tastes are so mature, and there is so much overlap. Like you're not really listening to like a full album anymore. You're listening to a playlist, and on that playlist, you can kind of find a little bit of everything, even within genres. And I think you see, like, I mean, like our latest record, Rivals, like, so there are so many different sounds that are going on in there. Like there's trap hats in some songs. They're like vintage 80s synths and guitars, but then there's also like modern like electronic sounds and clean vocals. So it's like it's a lot of different things, and like I think that's just where we are in music, where everyone's just kind of borrowing from this amazing little pot that's been, you know, like this little garden that's been planted over years and years and years of music, and you can see what's worked over time, and you can cherry pick little bits and pieces. And I think that's like a lot of our generation of musicians are like, it's not just like you're only a rock and roll musician, so that's obviously all you listen to. Like we listen to everything, like, and draw inspiration from it. And like, even if it's stuff that you don't like maybe vibe to, you're still listening to it and drawing like you're drawing inspiration from it because it's just somebody else's creativity. And you kind of know that now, where I think there's just less stigma in terms of like crossing genres and stuff.
Yeah. It's funny when you mention that, because of course when you mentioned like how music listeners today are a little bit more, I guess, I won't say advanced, but like you said, a little bit more, they're just not on the surface. Like they dig a little bit deeper. Because when I was younger, I'm a 90s baby. So like I grew up with, say, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, like the girls and boy bands. And when you played, and I mentioned this, I mentioned this like a lot of times when it's like Third Eye Blind would come on, or or Our Lady Peace, I'd be like leaving the room, and I feel like I should slap myself in the face, because I'm like, it wasn't poppy to me. And then when I got older, I don't know if it was just going through like, you know, adolescence or university, where it's like you'd listen to like an Our Lady Peace or you know, a band of that nature, and you're just like, how did I not like this song when I was younger? And it's like, oh, maybe you just didn't go through the motions that this song is representing. Because in fairness, Backstreet Boys were singing about like, you know, going out on a date with a crush or blah, blah, and you're like, I don't understand the message, but man, is it poppy. Where Our Lady Peace, it's like, I'll be waving my hand watching you drown. I'm like, why are you watching them drown? What are you doing that? It's like, just save them. But then when you're like older, you're like, oh man, yeah, that's what I do. So you're like, okay. But when you mentioned that, I was thinking of like, even country music today, like Sam Hunt uses kind of snares in his songs. You see sometimes country and pop crossover, and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, is the song good? Great. If it has a good meaning, awesome. I even looked at it. It's funny because your music video for, I'm just going to make sure I have it there, like No Secrets.
Yeah.
That one, because we talked about it prior, but I went back and looked at it because I was like, oh man, now that we've had this little chat, I went back and seen how much 80s references were in it. And some, to be fair, I don't know. Some, I was like, I remember the music video. I might not remember the band or the name of the song, but I was like, man, now when I go back and listen to those, I can't remember. I was just very surprised. I was like, I've heard this song before. I just didn't know it was done by that person. Like, Hit Me With Your Best Shot. I've always heard the name, but I've never associated like that artist to that song. And now when I go back and listen to it, I'm like, all right, I'll listen to that all day. But I have a niece and nephew that will listen to 90s music and say they hate it. And then I'm sure when they get older, they'll go like, how did I hate this stuff? This is actually pretty decent. I'm like, it's all coming back to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a product, and I mean, we were kind of joking about it before, but like the same way that now you could go on Spotify and you could find a really great playlist of good French music. You can watch those videos now. You can watch that video and you can look at all those reference, and you can actually go and listen to those songs like within a minute of watching of getting the reference, right? Like you don't have to go to a record store
Yeah.
and pick it up to listen to it. So it's like how you, for sure your tastes are going to be more broad because you've got access to it all in a way that like you never used to. So I think like I think like I'll loop myself into your generation because I'm like an 80s baby, but like our generation is like we still grew up when genre specific music and HMV and record stores were like more of a thing. And that was kind of the way that you accessed music was like, like most of the first records that I ever bought, like I bought them and that was what I had. I had an album and I listened to that album and now you can kind of like, you can get bored and just navigate yourself to something else and then something else and then something else. So you can hear so much more. So I think it's like easier to be like, I don't know. I feel like you would have attached so much significance to like, if you're going to buy a record, like you're putting your, that becomes a little bit of a piece of you because you kind of invested in it. Right. So you want that genre, that artist to do well in a way that like, now you don't have to be so attached to it. You can just kind of click on it. And if you like it, sweet. You don't need to like be like, well, I like this genre, so the other ones are bad.
Yeah.
No, like all music is seemingly has something good to it, which is, I think, the truth, right? Like music is just people's, like it's their interpretation of culture, like through sound, and it's little bits of. I was talking about this with Colin just the other day, and because I'm as you know from doing this podcast with me, I'm quite a thinker and I'm a talker. But I love writing music because it's so simple. It's just these little bits and pieces of fragments of sentences that when paired with sound, they mean so much and they can change your day. They can change your mood. They can change your life. And it's so simple. And people do it in every different genre and in all sorts of different ways, but it still has the same effect on people, like just around like music makes the world go around, but like legitimately, it's amazing. It's a wonderful thing. And to be able to kind of have access to so much of it now we're living in the golden age, so to speak.
Yeah. It's funny because when you were talking about, of course, you being a thinker, like you just made me think of sometimes you just listen to music because you like music, but when you actually dive into the lyrics a bit, like exactly the moment you said that about, you're creating all these songs and like it has meaning to it, I keep on coming back to when you're studying and someone has all these words in front of you and you're trying to remember it for a test and it's like you're not getting it. And then people are like, well, remember it in a different way. I'm like, okay. But like you can remember a song from like 15 or 20 years just because either the melody or it touched you in a certain way. Like the moment you said that, I don't know why this one came to mind, but like Sing for the Moment by Eminem, the very line of like, maybe they'll admit it when we're gone. I'm just still like, that still to me like rings deep because I don't know if it's just the way the music video hit it or the way that it's all put together. But I was like, man, that was like goosebumps when the first time I heard that, where I'm like, he's basically telling you a message of, hey, like when we're gone, maybe you'll admit that like this wasn't actually bad rap music, or like we're not actual like people out here trying to get your kids to,
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just like, holy shit. Like in my way, though, I was remembering as, when these people go, whether they're a rapper, artist, like whatever, you're going to look at them and be like, oh, okay. Like we looked at them kind of in the bad light, but look at all the great stuff they did too. That we just probably didn't give them credit for, just probably just took for granted.
Yeah. I mean, totally. Right. Like it stays with you. And it stays with you more than somebody talking to you about something, right? Like it's
yeah. If someone had to write out the lyrics to just say every song, but like, and then to do it a lecture like in a university where it's like maybe they'll admit it when we are gone. I'd be like, I don't know what you are talking about. What are you saying? But then if someone's like, all right, just bring an Eminem, get him to perform, and I'd be like, that's how you do it. Maybe that's what they should do in like university. Instead of learning it from a book, just bring in like a local artist and be like, he's going to sing you what's in this book. And then you're going to go home and be like, I know all about the Great Depression because he sang it in the song.
Well, there are plenty of us out of work right now. So if any universities are looking.
Yeah. I do want to bring up, of course, a little bit about the No Secrets, because we brought this up past in the interview, but I'm going to really hype it up this time because I feel like I downsold it last time. But like here in Newfoundland during COVID, there's not a lot to do, as sure as anyone else anywhere else in Canada would say, like, okay, it's not just Newfoundland, buddy. But I got into watching a lot of TV. I went back and watched like Saved by the Bell, the college years. I went back and watched like Boy Meets World, shows that I was surprised. I was like, oh, you did have a spinoff? Like, I didn't know even that 70s show had that 80s show. It's garbage, but I still watched a few episodes to be like, all right, I gave you a chance. You didn't live up to my potential. But we had one down here, Hudson and Rex. And that's originally how I got into your band, your music. And of course, like you said, I went through iTunes and I was like, man, that's a killer track on that it's like on that episode, who sings that? And I was like, oh, they're Canadian? Great. Then I was like, let's see what else they got. So then I started downloading a few more. And then I was like, I think I even tweeted at you and Hockey Night in Canada, which is like bold of me. It's like, hey, it's like, I'm just a guy in Newfoundland, but hey, you want to check this out? And sometimes the joy of social media, sometimes that's how it gets, looked at, or someone stumbles across it and goes, yeah, he's actually right. Some dude in Newfoundland actually has a point. But all the people, I was looking at that and I was in my mind, I was like, Toronto, Winnipeg, if they had a series, that is the perfect intro song. And I was like, Hockey Night in Canada, listen to this shit. Like, this is great. You should definitely use this for an intro video. And then I was like, I think you liked it, or I think, yeah, it's like a like. And I was like, holy fuck, they seen that? I was like, crap. Now I'm embarrassed. I didn't expect them to see that. I was expecting a comment of like, easy, buddy. Like, we know we're good, but don't tweet at Hockey Night in Canada for us. We can do that. I'd be like, oh, okay. Thank you.
No, the hockey folks have been really kind to us over the years. We've did our song "Eyes on Us."
Yeah,
was the Hockey Night in Canada song for all the home Leafs games.
Nice.
For the month of October, I think it was 2018. But yeah, so we've had a bunch of like sports in general has been like a really neat place for our music. We did the first big one that we ever had was an old song of ours called Coming Home, was featured for like the World Juniors broadcast. Like they did like a whole montage, like a whole sports montage to it and stuff, which is really cool. And then we've got to do like a few CFL halftime shows now, which has been really neat. And like, so for whatever reason, the sports folks have really gravitated to the Treble, which is cool. But yeah, it's neat seeing your songs in that way. It's a great, like, I mean, we love sports, so it's fun.
Yeah.
See them.
I just think like the reason I'll let you continue, but the reason that when you were saying like sports is so good to you guys, like I think it's just almost like because when you listen to one of those songs, like I listen to All the People. Now I've seen the music video after for No Secrets, and I was like, oh, this is great, but it's not what you envisioned it to be, and that's not like a knock on you. It's I was just very surprised because watching the Hudson and Rex episode where it's another character that we have known, Alan Hocko, that had Republic of Doyle down here. And like, you expect him to be like the good guy, and there's two detectives, and he ends up being like just a different character altogether. And like the song comes in at the end where it's like, oh, you were like, we were best friends, but now you're like this badass person that we're not friends anymore. But like, don't worry. It's almost like we'll get there down the road. And I'm like, oh, that's a killer song. But like, that's how they presented it to you. And I was like, cool. You see the music video. It's
so it's more of like, it was more of like a serious kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, but I get it because like some of the lines in that song, it's like, we've been telling secrets since like the day that we met. And I was like, oh, like, damn, like, what is this? But I get it when they implement it. It's almost like they listen to the song first. Like, how can we implement this into this episode? And I'm like, okay, weird way to do your weird way to do the TV show, but sure, because that's how it came across to me. It's almost like, how are we going to use this song for this episode? We're going to rewrite the whole episode so this song fits in. I'm like, do it.
No, it's funny. It's funny you say that. So we released that video at the very beginning of the pandemic. We finished it during the pandemic, during the first lockdown. We were passing green screen to each other at different households so we could finish the remainder of the scenes that we had to do. We went to like a Valley Village to get the remainder of the costumes before the stores shut down.
Yeah.
So that was our project for that whole first half. And it's been phenomenally successful. Like for us, like it just took off like wildfire. It got picked up in all these 80s forums. And just, I think it's got over 1 million views now. Rick Astley found it and tweeted it to his like millions of followers, which was amazing, and was kind of like gabbing with us about it. And it was on American national television. And so all this by saying, this is not a diatribe to talk about how successful the video was, but I will go on record in saying that I was a no. Patrick had that idea, and what he thought was a great idea, and it was probably for the same reason that you had that feeling in terms of what the song made you feel in terms of it, the way they used it on Hudson and Rag. I just was like, I don't know. I don't think it makes sense. I don't really understand it. I don't think people will watch it. I don't think it goes with the song. I don't know.
And their punishment to you, was to make you actually be in the video doing it. And it's like, you're the only one that doesn't like this. So you know what? Your punishment is we're putting you in the video. And you're like,
no, it's an advertisement for the benefits of collaboration, because I always like, no one has veto in our band if it's quorum. So we all like it's not Mark doesn't like something, so we're not doing it. It's kind of, so this is an idea somebody has, so okay, like sell me on it. And even if I'm not totally sold, if everyone else is, like, I'll do it. And I did. I danced, and I wore costumes, and I was all sorts of different people in front of a green screen for quite a while, and like it was a blast. It was super fun to do. And I think once we started filming, that was when I kind of like was like, oh, okay, this is going to be amazing.
Yeah. And it's very creative because, like you said, in a span of COVID, and it's like, okay, what can we do to make a music video? And like some people would just be like, well, how about we just don't release the music video until post-COVID? But you don't know how long that is. So like, sometimes creativity pans out, and obviously it did in this case. But like, again, I don't know all the references. I hope like people don't come after me like, how did this 90s baby not know all these 80s references? And I'm like, there you go. Like, you just said it out loud. How would a 90s baby know all the 80s references? But like, there was like Take On Me in there. There's Wham. Some other ones that I'm like kind of, I guess to ask you the question is like, what other music videos did you use? Because of course, some of them are so iconic that you see over time. Of course, watching it say on Much Music or Much More, where they do. Even when I grew up, these videos were still always on the go. But like, what other examples did you have in that video?
There were 1 million, and I'm not the person to ask about it. They're all, you can watch the side-by-side No Secrets video, which is also on our YouTube channel.
Nice. Okay.
Where the original videos are all up on there and listed. And no, the idea came up. It was Pat's idea. I'll give him credit to fuel his "I told you so."
Yeah.
But so it was his idea, and he's and like really interesting quality of his is he's always learning something new, and he's been really into film and like, so we do all of our stuff is DIY. So he's typically like the director, and then like all of us do everything from help light to holding cameras to costuming to whatever. Like, so all like we're doing all that ourselves. But he just geeks out over this stuff. So he started he was watching the video for, I think it's Eye of the Tiger. And
That's a great motivation. That no matter what you're doing.
He was just thinking about how they made it, and then started watching more of those videos because it's a really interesting generation of like what people were doing was fascinating with just in terms of like what like they like I mean that it's literally the golden age of the music video in a lot of ways. So he just thought it would be really cool to just kind of like try and do a shot for shot remake. So his pitch was actually he cut all those clips together to the song, and then we mimicked them from there. So it was like everything to making sure that you had like, this guy's got this type of hat, so you're gonna try and find that type of hat or make it, or this type of like shirt or whatever. Okay. And then you're gonna have to do this dance. So you're gonna like move your, I'm not gonna do it right now. It's like I couldn't do it then either. But yeah, so you're like kind of miming like I don't know, 11 seconds of these famous videos. But it was a blast to make. It's one of the more fun things that I've been a part of, and we've done a lot of weird stuff over the years. But it was cool, and it's like I think the proof is in the pudding. It's really neat to see. Like it's just like people are just always watching it, and they come back to it, and there's always something new to catch. And I also think it's like really fun and hilarious. At the time we released it, you know, you were saying like a lot of people were delaying. And I think like our instinct at the time was like people need content more than anything, especially in that first period of time where there was so many things that were unsure. And even now we're kind of looking at the end of it. By the time you didn't really know how long it was going to last, you didn't really know what was going on. There was so much insecurity. So I think escape was such an important thing. So we were just always we were going to plow full steam ahead. We're going to get this video out as fast as we can. We're going to get the record out. And a lot of things about that, like, have been tough because a lot of the things that come along with it, you know, the big tour that comes after the record getting the release, or a big show. We still haven't done our album. Haven't played a show in Winnipeg in years. So we were going to do a big album release show in our hometown, which was going to be super fun. So we didn't get to do all that stuff, but, you know, I think people really vibe with the album and the video and stuff, which I think if we could be responsible for a shred of people being happy in such a rough time, hell yeah, I'll do that any day, you know?
It's interesting because when you said that, like, I remember when the pandemic first started and there was a lot of people like figuring out like, okay, what are we going to actually do? Like, how are we going to keep ourselves going? Like, especially when you're not in your case, but say there are bands out there that like they were just getting to their peak, that people were just getting to notice them. And then pandemic hits. It's almost like, oh, great, we're starting right back from ground zero because now we got to build it all up again. But people went to Instagram Live to do stuff, and some people still do that. And I think that's great because it gives you your own fan base that's been there since day one, people that jump aboard now because there's nothing else really to do or to watch. So they're going on their Instagram to do these things. But yeah, I like how you kind of said like we had to make this content because there's always people out there that will say like, okay, no one's going to produce content because we're in COVID. And then there's the other crowd that will say, well, if no one's going to produce content, if that's how you think, then let us produce the content so that now we get more traction or like more hits. And I think that's cool. But when you mentioned about that music video, like I'll even go back to it now. Like I have the song. Anytime I go out, I listen to it on my iPhone. But like I'll go back to the music video. I like try to reference like where this music video come from, where this go to. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. So it's very visual. Like we live in a world now where everything's kind of, not that it was not before, but more people pay attention, I guess, to the visual aspects of music videos. So I'll go back and watch it like 3 or 4 times, maybe in a day. I know last night I watched it for a whole bunch of times, and I was like breaking it down. I was like, I remember this scene from like this move or this music video. So it's really like an interesting dynamic. And like, again, give him all the credit if you want, but you did a really good part in playing the part. Let's put it that way. Because there would have been people that's like almost like, oh, I can't believe that we're doing this video. Okay, I'll do it. But like you dove right into it. And I'm sure there are people out there that appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it was fun. It was good. It was good for me. I'd never really done anything that I'm a very serious front man.
Yeah, clearly.
It was fun to do something a little wacky, to just play dress up and do stupid dances. So it was cool.
Yeah, like the other thing I want to mention, of course, about that was like when I mentioned earlier, of course, All the People. I really like that song, and in kind of a fun aspect, like when we were in university, we had these projects that I was in a Canadian Studies class. So the end goal at the end of it, like we had a really kind of laid back teacher, and the end project was almost like, okay, create your own Canadian superhero. And I was like, man, like I'm not really into superheroes. Like I haven't watched a lot of these Marvel, DC movies, so I went to them and I'm like, can I kind of create my own Canadian TV show? And they were like, whatever, like I'm sick of you. Like just do what you got to do to get your grade. I was like, okay. So I came up with like this whole Canadian TV show called PR, which was like public relations. It was kind of like Suits meets, I guess, The Office, but it was supposed to be super serious. So I came up with like, I went full on into it. I was like, here's what the opening theme is. Who's here with the closing theme? And I think it was like Classified's. It was one of Classified songs, but it was remixed. But like when I go back to it, I guess because I'm in like the media aspect, I like TV and film. I look at some of these songs, like especially All the People, and I'm like, that would be a dope ass song for like a mystery show or like a detective show. And I'm just like, man, like you could just like have certain lines, like because over the years they change season openings. Like sometimes they'll just use the clip from the very beginning or a clip from the very end. I'm like, this song has so many things that you could use as an intro and extra. And I'll say that to my friends. So like, can you just play hockey? Can you just come back to like reality here? And I'm like, yeah. And I'll go, like, you leave, you're like, with a pen in your hand. You're like, why if I put this here? I will contact him and ask if I can use the song and blah, blah. And then you just come up with the whole thing. But I feel like with the generation of TikTok and Instagram and that now, like sometimes a song just takes off. Like just imagine tomorrow if I posted on it on like Instagram of like, here's what I thought a just detective show would be with this song, and someone's like, I like that song, but here's my idea of what I would do. And then it becomes like, the whole a treble challenge, and then that's how you get over. Like, or I use get over because I'm like a wrestling fan here, but like Robin Ottolini F-150, that goes like really well on country music, but apparently it was really trendy on Instagram first. I was like, okay, or TikTok. So yeah, it's a bit. I mean, people can take ownership of music in a way that they didn't used to be able to, which is pretty cool. Yeah, because I was like, when all that came to mind, I was like, man, imagine if you just come across your timeline one day and it's just like the treble challenge. You're like, we didn't do no treble challenge. What are you talking about? But then like you just see people like doing like crazy stuff with songs. You're like, okay, like I actually would be interested if you actually did do that, like tweet out the treble challenge and you put that No Secrets video and then told people, here, try to remake this yourself. You'd be surprised how many people would be like, send you like really crappy videos and be like, did I do okay? Is this good? And you'd be like, retweet it, reshare it, whatever, like more fans.
Yeah, maybe that'll be our next venture over a little while.
Now the other thing I want to mention, of course, like you mentioned about Rivals, like the latest album you have out. Tell me a little bit more about how that came to be, and like where do you expect it to I guess go or take off? I know a lot of people are going to say, every artist will be like, well, we really hope it does well, but like tell me a little bit more about this, because to someone like myself, that's essentially seeing a song put on TV, going on to iTunes, downloading a couple of tracks. That's how I came to like know of you guys. So like do you get a lot of stories like that as well? I guess it's kind of like a two-part question, but like, what do you expect from the album? And do you get a lot of stories of people coming up with this album now and going, I heard this song here, I really liked it, so I checked you guys out?
We definitely do. It's been specifically the Hudson and Rex one was kind of funny. We got we didn't know that it had been placed until we started getting like tweets and texts and stuff like that, and you were one of those.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's cool. It definitely like Rivals over the last. I mean, it's been out for over a year, which is wild. That this year just flew by.
Yeah.
Or it took a long time. I don't know.
Either or.
But no, it's cool. I mean, COVID's definitely thrown, and I'm sure a lot of musicians, especially in similar, like in a similar kind of position in the industry as we occupy, could sympathize. For me, the biggest thing that you hope for from a release is touring. So like, I mean, our live shows are kind of are our favorite part of music. So this has been definitely a tough year. But yeah, I think the thing we normally measure success by what type of touring we get and can do on our own. So for us, it's a mix of touring is a mix of doing like independent shows. So like our own headliner shows across Canada, and then getting brought along by artists with a bigger profile, and opening for them. So the last year we did a mix of both of those, and it was cool because you see, you know, it's a lot of the times it's your release that gets you those spots on those bigger tours. And then you build more fans. And then the next time you come to town, you've got, and sometimes Spotify is the reason why people come to your show. So that's, I think, a lot of like how you measure how I think we measure success for a record. So it's interesting. I think we would have been planning on having quite a big year this year. And I think the record did everything that we were hoping that it did. Like people seem to be listening and loving it on Spotify, which is really cool. And Apple Music and Amazon and every other thing. Seems like the stream counts are great, which is very flattering to hear that people are still listening to us after being around for such a while and chopping and changing over the years. And then the video as well, and the few videos we've done as well, where all of them did really well this year, which was really cool. But yeah, it's a little sad because those are the things where it's like you want to see those view counts translate into faces in the crowd. And I think that's kind of what we hope for. So I hope come the fall or whatever it is, I think things are going to start coming back a little bit, which would be really cool. And I hope to get out there and play some shows again, because that's really what it's all about. The internet is fun, but it's not the same. It's not the same as playing a show. You know?
Yeah, like feeding off the crowd and its energy. Like I think it's funny because when I look at it in the term of a comedian, like sometimes when you go on these Instagram lives and you see people perform, some people like it just because they're in the content or like they're in the comfort of their own home, and then they can see, you know, the messages come across on the screen, which you don't really probably see that in a concert. Like my joke, I think on a few other episodes I mentioned, is like if you go to a Rascal Flatts concert and you yell out from like, I don't know, the third or fourth row, it's like, I love you guys. It's like, I went to see you when I was 16. It's like they're just going to keep on singing because you're getting zoned out. Where like when they're doing it on Instagram, they might see that comment and they'd be like, oh, that's really cool, Brian. Like hope you had a great 16th birthday, blah blah blah. And you're like, oh my god, they actually said something to me. That's cool. But yeah, to feed off a live crowd is something in itself, because there have been concerts. Like I was a big We the Kings fan. And I think when you look on YouTube, they show you an actual concert and the crowd just starts singing along with them, like any other band, of course. But it's like, it's got to be like really cool when you actually see a whole bunch of fans sing a chorus with you. And you're like, holy shit. Like they know our songs and they're singing it with us. Where on an Instagram, you're like, sing it with me. Why can't I hear you sing it with me?
No, it's totally not the same. I mean, and it's been cool for us because we've got to do it at the level we're at. We've got to do some really, really, really big shows, but then we also have done a lot of really, really small shows. Yeah. And to be honest, either experience is really cool in that regard. Like even if it's like, I don't know, you're in a city that you don't live in, and even if it's 10 people, and you start, the one song comes on that everybody does kind of know, and that's the reason why they came out that night, and they made their night about you. They bought the ticket, they went to the bar, they maybe called up a friend they hadn't seen in a while, or whatever, and then everybody starts singing a little bit. It's all worth it. And then you get to shake hands after and get to know people. And, you know, some of our best friends in cities that we don't live in, started off as fans who were just coming to a show. So that is definitely, like, I think the thing that I miss the most.
It's kind of cool that you said that, because I'm thinking back of when we had like Ian Castleman on from Mariana's Trench, and he said when they first started off, it was like, you know, people would come to the show and they're fans, and then years later they're coming back with their kids, and like, you know, they still know them because they know the face, but like, it's kind of like a weird moment where you're like, holy, like, are we getting old here? Like, are we? It's like, no, you guys are just, it is what it is. But to them, they're like, they're fans first, and then they become friends then after, because of how many times they go. I think he said there was one that went to like 16 shows. I think it was either in a year, or they just traveled with the band, almost like wherever they went. And I'm like, that's kind of cool and dedication. But I feel like I'm in a weird aspect where if I was doing podcasting from each different, I don't know, city, and then someone came up to me on each different city and they're like, hey, I seen you in Montreal. Hey, I seen you. I'd be like, can you just, like, I'm glad you're coming to see me, but like, are you okay? Because I'm doing the same stuff over and over. Like, save your money.
No, I think with music, it's definitely, you know, you like, it's that type of experience for a lot of people. And the idea of going to multiple dates of the tour, even though it's the same show, it's like, I think music has a great way of making people feel like they're a part of something. They're a part of that, whether it's the you know, their belief in that band contributed to the success, is a powerful thing for a lot of people, just to have that little bit of identity. And it's cool. I mean, like, I know, like, those guys are really nice guys from many times that I've interacted with them. And most artists, that's, you know, you do notice and you do see it. And it's definitely like, you know, I know you make a joke about like, oh, are you okay? It's like, I think in a lot of ways, music helps people feel more okay. And that's, I think, like, a pretty wonderful thing. So if going to, you know, 10 shows of the same tour or whatever, following somebody around, it's, you know, it's their way of navigating this experience. And it's pretty cool.
I guess sometimes people might just, you know, travel with the band sometimes to see, like, if they do something differently on a different, you know, a different date or a different venue.
We make mistakes is what we do. That's what you get when you go to multiple live shows, is you start noticing that it's you start seeing the chinks in the armor.
Yeah, because I look at it, because, like, you know, if you go to one comedy festival or one comedy night, like, I remember when Jim Gaffigan came to Ottawa, I only seen him once, and I was like, okay, great. But my buddy went to see Louis C.K. twice when he was in Ottawa, like, because he had tickets to back-to-back shows, and he couldn't get rid of the other ones because it was just like the late night show and people didn't want to barge their money. So he went to see him twice, and he was amazed as a comedian himself of, like, how the first time you go see him, you're like, oh, like, that stuff wasn't planned. He's just really good at improvising. No, like, even when you think, like, every moment where he puts up his hand or he does something when he's, like, face or features, whatever, that's all planned. Like you said, he did it the exact same way the second time and the first time. And that's how I think sometimes, like, musicians do it, but it could be, it's like a different environment. So it could be like when you're in Montreal, if that's your hometown, you might be a little bit more amped up compared to, and I'm going to say it because no one's going to give a shit when I say it, but it's like when you come to Newfoundland and it's like, oh my God, or how did we get here? Like, did someone fuck up our tour date and we ended up in Newfoundland? Because there have been acts where it was like, my favorite one to use is years ago when Hilary Duff was just coming out. People were so excited because they're like, wait, Hilary Duff's coming to Newfoundland? Are you sure that's not a typo? And it ended up, her PR came out and she said she thought she was going to New Zealand. And we were like, of course she did. Of course she did, because she's in her peak. Why would anyone in their peak come to Newfoundland? Like, we're still waiting for Garth Brooks to come, but by the time he comes, it's like, I'll be like 50, and then I'll be like, I remember Garth Brooks. He's like, is he going to do the same thing that he did when he was in his like 40s? It's like, no, Brian, he's like in a wheelchair. I'm like, well, why did he wait so long to come? It's like, because no one knows we're here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of planning that goes into it, but there's definitely a certain amount of, you're going to feel a crowd out in the same way that comedians will tell different jokes in different cities. Although the jokes are typically already exist, it's like playing a song. The same way we'll play a different set sometimes, or you'll play, longer, shorter, depending on the crowd. If it's, you'll adapt and adjust, and things go wrong, and then all of a sudden you're playing an acoustic song. These things happen, but it's fun, and that's the best part about that. We had, like, I used to always do a spiel about live music when we played, and that was one of my favorite parts of the show, because every little bit of that evening is, like the guy who's heckling is part of the show. The rain that you had to fight through to get to the venue, the parking, your foot being sore, or them playing your favorite song at your favorite moment. Like, all of that comes together to make your experience, right? It's not just the songs that get played on stage. It's everybody together that makes the experience. So, and that's what makes it cool, and that's why we do it.
Yeah. It's funny because when you said that, like, have you ever had, say, fans come up after a show, or maybe even during a show, even though it'll be like weird unless they rush the stage or something, and said, you didn't play my favorite song, or I really like this song? Because I used to think I don't know, like, you can still watch it on YouTube, and I'm kind of bummed out that it's no longer there, like a show, but like Mark Hoppus from Blink-182 had this thing called Hoppus on Music. And at the time, I'm a big Blink-182 fan, but I was also a big Fall Out Boy fan. And he had Patrick Stump on, and he said that the one time they were in Chicago, he remembers Patrick coming up to him as, like, a kid or maybe someone in their teens, and said, yeah, I really liked your show, but I didn't like that you played that song. And then he reversed it on him and said, so now that you're a part of Fall Out Boy, do people come up to you and say that? And he's like, yeah. And how does that make you feel? Almost like, like tongue in cheek. And he's like, oh, I hate it. I hate when people tell me, like, I just worked my ass off for a set, and then you basically say, I liked it, but you didn't play my favorite song. And he's like, that's how I felt.
Yeah, you definitely, that does happen. People can get very opinionated with you about what you should and shouldn't have played, and how there's people aren't always shy. And that's great.
Yeah, I would be the one, if you came to Newfoundland to do a show, I'd be like the one in the fans, like, they actually came and they're still young. Like, how are you guys not amped up for this? Or it's like after the show, I see you and be like, remember that time we did a podcast? You're like, I don't even know who you are, man. And I'd be like,
we've done this. I totally know who we are now.
Yeah. I'm like, how dare you? I am wearing your gear, and you're like, that says the Trebles with an S. Like, you went to the wrong store. You went and bought. I'm like, no, I can cross that out. Don't worry about it. How did you guys come up with the name? Because I feel like in my mind, as a joke, I'm just thinking like you guys were pitching around musical names, and someone's like, why don't we just call ourselves Treble? And then it's like, it's been a long day, we'll sleep on it. And then it's like, Mark loves it, we'll go with that.
So we definitely had a hard time coming up with names, as I think a lot of bands do. We drove by a lot of signposts and tried to combine words from them, as many bands do. We tried band name generators, and came up with a lot of horrible versions. And at the time, there were 3 of us in the band. It was myself, Graham, and Colin. I have always been really into British soccer.
Okay.
And still am. And in soccer, the treble is when you win 3 major trophies in a season.
Okay.
And it's very few teams have done it. It's a very rare thing to do. So it's very unattainable and majestic. And I think that's always also how we felt about writing a really good song. So
it's unattainable.
yeah, it's this elusive thing that you're always striving for but rarely achieve. And there were three of us at the time, and then you add in the musical connotation.
Yeah.
At like, I don't know what it was, 20 years old and probably 6 or 7 beers in or whatever it was, it felt right. And by the time that the band started taking off, so to speak, like once we accrued, like, I don't know, enough followers that it really felt like it wasn't just ours anymore. We couldn't change it. And some people really like it. Some people think it's the worst name in the world, but there's a band called Hoobastank who, charted like #1 worldwide. So I think it's just that was what we did. And our band name is the Treble. And
I like the meaning behind it, right? Like it's good because it kind of ties into like what you think it is, and then putting it in the music side of it as well. Like we had a band on from Newfoundland that used the word "quote the Raven," but like people come up to them at shows and they're like so pissed off. It's like, it's not quote, it's quoth, and it's like, leave them alone. Like maybe they just like "quote the Raven," like whatever. But I think it's funny because when you come up with band names, sometimes if you're not three brothers, it's probably harder. Like, I mean, come on, the Hanson brothers, Jonas brothers, that's easy.
My dad wanted us to be called Grackelmar, which is the first 3 letters of the 3 of our names.
I mean, I feel like if I heard that for the first time, I'd be either thinking that's like a rock geology group, or I'd be like, that sounds like a very like death metal band.
Yeah. So we get a lot of the treble. We got a lot of the trebles or treble. And then the only other dark period in our band's history was in 2015 when Meghan Trainor came out with the smash hit All About the Bass. That was, they don't talk about the effects that had on Winnipeg rock groups, the name the Treble, but we definitely it was a tough period, but we got through it. And here we are now. We're still
that is when you retweet. That is when you think creatively, and we're like, you know what? Let's send her a tweet, and we can be the opening band for her. It's like, it's not great it's not ideal, but maybe we'll get a few friends from that. Like. She like sings halfway through. It's like, it's all about that bass, and here's the treble. And I'm like, what? It's like, great. Yeah, I can imagine that being like a pro and a con, but yeah, I guess there has. Were you ever in a concert? Like I look at it, so I'm like a wrestling fan. And you know how people will like, or even if you're at an event and some people just get smart with you. But have you ever been in a concert where people have said that, like halfway through a set, people just start singing, I'm all about that bass, no treble, and you're just like, no, let's not do this.
I don't think so. We leaned into it a little while ago. We made shirts. Shirts that say all about the treble.
Nice. There you go.
Those were a hot ticket for a while, so that was fun.
Because you are wearing that shirt, you are. It seems like you really like supporting Winnipeg bands. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that shirt, because off the hop, I said I really liked it. Explain more.
So this is my current favorite t-shirt. These are some friends of ours who are an amazing Winnipeg band called Mise en Scene. So we've been playing shows together for years now. They played our very first CD release party, and we were going to play together for our release last October as well. And we've kind of been like, our journeys have kind of been side by side for years, and they're doing really big things these days. They just released their record, Winnipeg, California, which I think is an amazing album title, and great music and great people. So if you're looking to check out some more Winnipeg music, they're wonderful people and wonderful artists. So they're worth your time, and great merch, man.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you should guys, whenever you guys do go back on like tour, have that show, you should come out with one that like has Winnipeg, California on it. But like, implement the treble in a way, like, you know, all about that treble in Winnipeg, California.
That'll be our cross-branding opportunity.
Yeah, there you go.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Mark Brusegard for coming on to the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying thanks for listening and good night.